Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is Monday review time. And after an enforced break last week when the Gills went to Gresty Road and managed to pick up a 1-1 draw against Crew Alexander, unfortunately, both myself and Rhys were busy that Sunday. So unfortunately, we couldn't bring you anything. I had a fairly hectic few days, so there was no content on the channel for a little while. And Rhys was similar, aside from his match video, which I hope you've all checked out. But we are back. We're still unbeaten.
We are.
We are scoring goals. And Steve Evans was in town. Rhys, are you good? Have you had a good couple of weeks since we last chatted?
Yeah, a good couple of weeks. My family been round over the last week or so. So that's the reason why I didn't make any we didn't make content together last week. But yeah, it's been nice, and yeah, the weather's just about holding out here in Germany. I don't know what it's like over in England.
It was sunny this morning while I was being given the run around playing football. It looks like it's about to bucket it down now though. But
Oh,
you
God.
know, we digress.
We do already.
Let's go all the way back like we normally do to 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Team news came in. I was a bit baffled. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it was a funny one. It was really weird. I don't know. I mean, just I've just thought go in five at the back end, which what it looked like. I thought, oh no, this reminds me of the Mansfield game again. I thought, oh god, here we go. We're going to get absolutely turned over because for me it was such a surprise. But yeah, it was a bit of a surprise to me. I don't know if you had the same thought process of like, oh wow, okay, this is a bit.
Yeah,
of
we
an
was
odd
trying
one.
to work it out. I spoke to Tom and Glenn who came on our match video, and we were like, we're not sure. Is it a back four and Shea Alexander switched so that Will Wright goes out to full back, or is it a back three, which meant then you was then playing either a Robbie McKenzie or an Alex McDonald out of position at left wing back, but it couldn't be McKenzie because then didn't have enough centre midfielders. As it transpired, it wasn't too over the top. It just meant that Shea Alexander had essentially swapped from right to left and played as an orthodox left fullback. So I don't know whether there was an issue with Ryan Law in terms of not being able to get through 90 minutes. He might have picked up a knock.
It's possible,
but I thought the only other thing I could think was he was trying to go with as much experience and physicality in that back line as well, because Will Wright's very big for a right back. Elkan Baggott obviously added height to the back line. Max Emar, the most experienced in there, along with Glenn Morris behind them. And Shea Alexander is obviously 27 years old, whereas Ryan Law still only sort of 19, 20. So that was the only sort of way we could look at it to make it not so weird, I suppose.
But yeah,
yeah,
and it was a bit. It was mainly we would talk about the back line that was a little bit hard to work out because the rest of it I think was easily you can work out what was going on. But it was just that back line was a little bit unusual, and something which I hadn't really seen before. But like you say, it was hard. It was like putting square pegs in round holes to begin with. We couldn't quite work out where people were going to go. But yeah, it was a bit of a brain scratcher, head scratcher, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, kind of worked out in the end, I suppose.
Yeah, it did. We're not going to sit here and pretend that this was the greatest spectacle of football in the history of the game, because it wasn't.
No.
We was a Steve Evans team for 2.5 seasons, and we know how Steve Evans team's set up. They're big, they're physical, they get in your face, they get it into the final third as quick as they can, and they work from there, and then they try and get their good players on the ball. And that worked very successfully for us, especially that COVID season when we got it into like Verdane Oliver, and then we had people like Ollie Lee, Carl Dempsey, Jordan Graham, and Alex McDonald around them. I've written down attritional and not for the purists first half, but in terms of everything that they are, Stevenage and Steve Evans teams are, I thought we stood up to it absolutely brilliantly. We stood up to their physicality. We stood up to them when they was getting handsy and pulling shirts and wrestling in boxes. We stood up to them niggly fouls. Just thought it was a really, really solid. And I know you've said about this on previous episodes. It was a proper Gillingham performance, I thought, in that first half.
It was a proper Gillingham performance, and one of the things that if I was to ask someone, describe to me a typical Gillingham versus Stevenage game, what would that actually look like? I think this would be the the textbook example of it. Gritty, hard fought, very physical, and just evenly balanced kind of game. And battled out to the end, and that's kind of how I saw this game, really. And it was every result up until the final whistle was possible, I think, really. And that, so therefore my thoughts there is that a 1-1 was the right result, was probably the most balanced result you could get. I mean, it's pretty even throughout. Well, most of the time, actually. I think first half it was slightly better, but we'll probably talk about it in a minute. But no, absolutely, it was a typical Gillingham performance, which I think most fans in the ground, if not all, will be very pleased when they walk away from Priestfields and go, yeah, I enjoyed that game, and it was a team to be proud of. They really battled hard and gave 110% across the park, and that's kind of how I felt about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't a game that was poor. It kept you engaged and it kept you intrigued because there were so many sort of individual battles all over the park. And I thought Mika Mandron probably had one of his best home performances of the season, but we'll get to that later. I've written, in terms of stuff happening in the game, I've put early Jordan Roberts cross flashed across our box. I thought aside from that, we were better first period. I thought when we got it into good areas, we caused them problems.
I mean,
and we should lead before they score. I'm still trying to work out how Scott Casket has managed from 2 yards out to get it halfway up the Raynham end.
I mean, can you have expected goals as one? I mean, probably 99% at that rate. You know, one person. You know, I think I said in my video, like if it would do that 99 more times, they put it in the back of the net 99 more times. It just happened to be that one he missed.
He will, yeah.
And he got into the right position. He was just leaning back slightly, but that's what caused it to go over the bar and just mistime his shot. Is that a lack of confidence? No, I just think it's one of those things. And sometimes that just happens to players.
Yeah, I think
sometimes the goalkeeper, it slips through his hands when it should be an easy catch and it goes to the back of the net. So it's just that's the striker version of it. And that's what happened to Casket yesterday, you know, and it, you know, and people will laugh at it and say, "Yeah, this is why they only scored 5 goals all season or whatever." But actually, that happened to. I remember it happened to Adam Barrett about 8 or 9 years ago.
Jermaine McGlashan a few years ago as well in what was then the Johnston's Paint Trophy, was essentially in the net and managed to get it over the bar as well. So he's not the first, and he certainly won't be the last.
No, absolutely not. So I'm not worried about that. It's just a bit of a shame that on the back of that, whilst we had momentum, Stevenage got the other end and score what I can only describe as actually a pretty decent header from Danny Rose, actually, in fairness.
It was a good header, very good header. Just back to the Casket chance, it's a real shame because that was, we've spoken about Haki Badelica plenty of times, for both of us, and said that, you know, he goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. That run driving into the 6-yard box was the very best of Haki Badelica, and that quick turn of pace, good feet to get away from his man. And he's done everything he can. He's picked out his teammate. Should be sitting here talking about a very good assist for Hakib. Unfortunately, we're not, because Scott managed to lift it over the bar. But yeah, to then compound the frustration, I think it was their only shot on target in the first half.
It was.
It is a good header. I get that. I think we can deal better with the first bit. I thought Will Wright was very good on the day, but I think he just got sucked inside too easily. If you look back, he gets sucked into the 6-yard box, and then they get 2-on-1 out on the left, and he can't get out there quick enough to then stop the second cross. But from there, Danny Rose, it's a majestic leap. There's no point in pretending, and I hate this blame culture. Everyone has to beat it at fault sometimes for the goal. When the ball comes into our 6-yard box, Danny Rose leaps and plants a header out of Glenn Morris's reach and gives him absolutely no chance. But yeah, I just thought the first phase of defending, if we'd just been a little bit cleverer, we might have then stopped the second phase. But it's still a very decent Stevenage goal.
You're right, though. The first phase of defence we should have done a lot better, because it was an overhit cross, essentially, that then was not closed down quick enough to try and stop the second cross. But I think it was Saxon Early was the one who put the ball into the box, who got the assist for that goal. And it was just, and just, it was such a good cross. And when it goes to Danny Rose, you think he was leaning back as well. And there's a couple, I think Baggett's there and Amer's there somewhere in the mix, and he just manages to leap above them. I thought, you know what, actually, you could argue, you could blame, point fingers around, but actually it's just a decent header at the end of the day, and he's placed it nicely over Morris. And you think, oh, okay, fair enough, it's a decent goal. We should have done better, but you know what? Sometimes you got to give credit when credit's due. Yeah,
and also to give a bit of slack to Will Wright, he's played centre half for the last 3 games, and then he's been asked to go and play as a fullback again. So maybe he's just naturally drifted into that centre back position, which is what he's done for essentially the last few weeks. But
yeah,
the response was brilliant, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you could hear it on the iFollow, but the crowd straight away, we were up, we were clapping. There was Gillingham songs. It wasn't a case of, oh no, because that was Mansfield. We go 2-0 down, we lose the football match. I've got no qualms about that at all. But this is a slightly different Gillingham now, a few weeks on. We stood up to be counted in terms of supporters, the coaching staff on the touchline, and the players as well. And they're the most important ones. And 5 minutes later, I think we were level. And it's an absolute, I know Gills' Twitter described it as a peach of a cherry of a corker of a cross. That's the second one this week for Will Wright. But equally, we was directly in line with Elkan Baggett as he ran towards it. For me, it's the football equivalent of a dart going right in the middle of the bullseye. It was smack bang in the middle of his forehead, and you heard the noise, and then you heard the noise at the back of the net. A brilliant, brilliant header from the young man.
It was because I had the opposite view from my camera angle. It was literally was just Wright's cross that went into the box, and I'm sitting there thinking some of our
So you're
deliveries
getting
are
it from the Gordon Road camera, I think,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm getting it from that side, and I'm looking at this free kick position. I'm going, you know what? We've had a few crosses and a few set pieces throughout the season, and I think throughout these games throughout the season, they have not been very good. I think, come on, just put a decent one in for once. And I thought, well, right, so the ball, he has got the capability. And then suddenly, as soon as it left his foot, I thought, God, if someone gets on the end of that, there's no stopping that.
No,
Just
it wasn't
absolutely.
at all. Keita
And
didn't move at all. He just planted his feet and he just didn't even go either way. I mean, don't even think he got a hand up. You know, the customary like, oh, I look like I'm trying type
yeah,
thing.
it's
There
just
wasn't
like
even time for that.
just conceded it and went, well, that's in the back of the net.
Yeah,
And
literally
it was
was
a
that. It
good,
was
solid
brilliant.
header. And I've just read recently, it's I don't know if you've got this on your notes, but it was the first player to score in the EFL that's Indonesian.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah,
I did rack my brains briefly. I essentially I couldn't come up with anyone else that I can remember even playing
no,
substantial amount of games in the EFL. But no, he's getting better and better every week,
yeah,
Elkan Baggett, and he deserves his place back in the side, I think. And
absolutely.
he had to bide his time because essentially we'd been doing all right without him. So, but yeah, really, really good response. And I've wrote deservedly level at the interval.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think when Stevenage went 1-0 up, obviously we'd switched halves, hadn't we? We'd switched sides at the start of the game with facing the Raynham.
I think
And
that
that's
was probably
always,
something to do with Mr. Evans saying they
of
love going
course.
towards the Raynham end second half. So if you win the toss, just change it up.
Of course, and no one likes that. But I think we what do we have? We had 10 minutes to try and use that Raynham end 12th voice to try 12th man to try and get the ball in the goal. And I'm thinking we need to score in this half really to try and get level because we need to use that advantage of facing the Raynham end. And luckily, and we managed to do it. And yeah, it's one of the advantages sort of shooting towards the Raynham end. Actually, it's a big psychological advantage. But it's annoying that we didn't have it in the second half. But we took advantage in the first half of it and got the goal that I think we ultimately deserved.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think if we'd gone in behind it, it'd been very, very harsh. Big thing for me, and I don't know if you noticed at the time, because I didn't straight away, they had to go and change their shape to counter how well we were playing because they took off Carl Piergiani at the break and brought
Yes.
on Michael Boswick, who I think just played just in front, and they went to a back four rather than a three. I thought Piergiani was probably the best of their three centre-backs. So I was quite pleased that he'd been taken off. I thought Dan Sweeney was solid enough without really noticing him. But the other one, Terence Van Kooten, just spent the whole first half just running into the back of our players and giving away needless free kicks. So I was quite surprised, not at the change, but which centre half came off. I thought Bostwick, and we'll get onto this a bit later when we do best Stevenage player. I thought Bostwick gave them a big element of control, almost in the same way that Sean Williams gives us control and composure because he's so experienced at the level. He's played for Steve Evans a couple of times. But that was credit to us, I think, and a feather in our cap that they'd had to change their shape and make a change at the break because we've been fairly decent.
I think they're absolutely. And I noticed it as well in the second half. I probably talked because it was a different shape that we had to attack. But yeah, and also you're right of Van Kooten. I thought he'd be the one that would come off. I was surprised that it was that come off. It was Boswick came off.
No, Boswick came on. Piergiani came off.
Piergiani came off. Sorry, yeah. Piergiani came on. Came off. That was a surprise to me because I thought he's a tough one. He's a tough nut to crack. So it was a surprise for me as well. So I agree with you on that side.
I've written down second half. We had to weather an early storm. To be fair, Stevenage did come out like league leaders should come out against the side starting in 18th, and we did have to. I think there was a big Max Emar block early on in the second period from Jordan Roberts.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was weird because we were watching us defend the Raynham end in the second period, like we've already alluded to. We then had a half chance. There was a corner, really good corner, I think, from Sean Williams down the far end, and I think Baggett and Amar both jumped. And I think it glanced off. I don't know if you had a better view. Obviously, we're 100 yards away, but it looked like it glanced off one of their heads, and it only needed again a middle of the forehead contact, and I think it could have been 2-1 to the Gills. I don't know what your view was, Rhys.
So yeah, it's one of those. When I'm making the highlights, I usually when it happens, I like to put in a couple of Banks highlights just in case. Like I've got one in the bank if nothing ever formulates in the game, and that was one of them. And actually, I look back at it and go, do you know what? If all it needed was a touch and the ball into the box was brilliant. Stevenage are flat-footed, and I think it could have even glanced off both their heads in succession. It was just they were like an inch behind the ball each time, and it flashed us across the face of goal. And I thought, all that needed was any contact, and that was in the back of the net.
Mhm.
And I think that was probably like, ugh, it was a bit gutting because it was such a beautiful delivery into the box from the corner, because we were favouring the in-swingers of Williams, I think, this game, and we were just unfortunate that that one in particular, both Baggot and Edwards didn't get anything on it, because if they did, it was in the back of it, it would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, because it looked very close. Like it was like they was in the 6-yard box from where we were sat down the other end of the park. But yeah, it passed us by, unfortunately. I think Haki Badelakun had another sort of snapshot where he drifted onto his left foot and blazed one over or wide.
Yeah.
Then Glenn Morris had to make his best save of the game. I know
Yes, he did.
Mika Mandron's suffering from a bit of a goal drought, but I think he forgot where he was, unfortunately. He's done his defensive duty, and we slightly say that in jest. But yeah, I think that defensive header was going to drift into our bottom corner. It was a brilliant stop from the cat, getting down and got a big right hand on it to shovel it out for a corner.
It was really good, and also actually it's a funny one because Mandron would have been caught in two minds, because just behind him, I don't know who the Stevenage forward was, but if he didn't get that header, it could have easily been another shot on target with much more, you know, force and directness, and could have been a goal for Stevenage. So he has to get something on it. It's just unfortunate that he had to really stretch Morris to tip it around the post, you know. But you know, he's not a natural defender in that sense, but nearly put it in the back of the net, and they got another one tallied towards him, but. Yeah, that was the biggest save that Morris had to make all game, actually, and it was an important one. And yeah, it was. My toes were slightly curling when that header came off of man.
Yeah, I think we
like,
sort of
oh,
all held
God.
our breath for a second or two and thought, please, please, no. And then there was another moment shortly later, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, then one of the Stonewall Stevenage penalty claims that Steve Evans alluded to, and we will get on to Steve later on. Alex Gilby and Shea Alexander challenged for a loose ball in the box. Alexander's clearly just trying to clear the ball out into over the halfway line or into touch to get us back in our shape and settle back down into defending our own box. Gilby goes down like he's been shot for me. I said at the time he should have been booked. I went mad on the match day live. I've seen it back. I've not changed my mind. I still think he dived.
Yeah. So, and I had to say, I think you would have had more of a clearer view, but
Yeah,
again,
we were 7
right in
rows
front of it.
right in front of it. Yeah.
And it's one of those, when I'm watching it, and quite often I try and make some highlights of my videos, and I look at that and I go, it's a nothing moment in my opinion. Just like I just couldn't see anything for that. I mean, it's a funny one because I do wonder though, if it happened the other way around, how much the Raider men would get involved if it was for us. You know what I mean? It's a really funny
absolutely. We'd share a penalty, of course you would, but if you take out the emotion and the two teams, it's not a penalty for me. Not in a million years.
It didn't look like it for me, and I'm glad you kind of said that, because I was about 80% sure it wasn't. Out of all of it, I was like, oh, I'm not 100% sure, because you know, ultimately I'm 100 yards away from that happening. I know I've got the camera zoom, but you know, it's not the same as being just behind the goal when you just see it happen. But for me, it looked like it wasn't a penalty, and I'm glad that you've kind of backed that up from your view in much closer proximity.
And then we'll get on to the second one. Which I must admit, I don't remember happening in the game. We've spoke before we started recording. I've watched the highlights back. We think the second Stonewall penalty is for the most gentle tug or push by Will Wright on Danny Rose, if there is any contact at all. It looks like it's outside the box, so it's not a penalty even if it's a foul.
No, firstly, it's outside the box, and secondly, it's just, you know, I don't. Again, it was so non-noteworthy. I just didn't see anything in it, and I just thought it was just a motion of play and game played on. And again, I was like, what? How is anyone calling for that? Yeah, for me, a stupid a moment that I don't know why Stevens is calling that as a Stonewall penalty. It eludes me. I've no idea on that one. I'm kind of speechless on that, really.
And if we have missed one, Steve, and you are watching, I do apologise. But if you think that's a penalty and a Stonewall penalty, then never mind. Yeah. They had their big let off in the first half when Scott Cashkett managed to scoop over from a couple of yards. We had Haas with about 15, 20 minutes to go when I think Max Emar was upfield still from a set play, and Shea Alexander and Will Wright essentially left it for each other, and it bounced. And this was their big chance. But again, sorry, Steve, you didn't mention this in your press conference after the game. You didn't mention that Danny Rose handballs it before Jordan Roberts escapes and goes through one-on-one. It clearly bounces off of Danny Rose's arm, which puts Roberts away. Luckily for us, Agent Roberts, former Lone Star, somehow missed with just Glenn Morris to beat from about 10 yards. And again, it was another hold your breath moment from the Raynham end, and luckily it passed Stevenage by.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually because in the build-up, it was a looping ball over the top, and as it was falling down, I thought, well, this could be trouble, and it strikes the hand, and I'm like, that's handball, and I don't know why it's not given because it puts who was it again? It put through. Totally forgotten his name.
Jordan Roberts, former Gills
Jordan Roberts,
player,
yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah, so it put Roberts through, and then I thought, okay, this is the moment, and then he misses this chance. I'm thinking it's going to go and nest on the bottom left-hand corner. And then I watched the replay, and I'm still convinced he's going to score in the replay. That's kind of
I
how...
think I was this morning watching the highlights as well.
And I'm thinking, how's he not got that on time? I mean, maybe it's justice served in the sense that I think there's a handball in the build-up to that, and as a result, karma worked in our favour in that sense. But if you believe in all that, but it's I watched it. I've watched it a couple of times. I thought, I probably couldn't. I'm not fit enough to get into that position. But if I was given the chance, I reckon I could have buried that myself.
Yeah, I did say to the wife that I thought she could have scored Scott Caskett's chance. And Jordan Roberts, a player in his form, should certainly hit the target as a minimum. And I'm not. And I know I said in jest that Steve's missed the handball. I must admit I didn't see a handball in real time in the stadium. But it's clear as day when you watch the highlights that it strikes Rose on the arm, which essentially gets Jordan Roberts in behind. After that, I thought we saw it out fairly well. They tried to lump diagonals into our box. We headed everything away. And again, I can't get away from the fact that I thought 1-1 was the fairest result.
I absolutely agree with you on that one.
Right. Let's talk about our returning friend before we get on to Stevenage's best player and Gills' match rating and man of the match and all that type of thing. We can't go through the entire episode without concentrating on Steve Evans and Paul Rayner. He'd been fairly respectful in the week, fairly reserved, I think, for Steve Evans. He'd come out in his press conference on Thursday or Friday. I had a little watch on the Stevenage YouTube channel and was fairly complimentary. Said he had a lot of friends there, aside from one man. I think we all know who that is.
Yeah.
Completely changed after the game, though, didn't he? And during the game, which I've got no issue with. Steve Evans is not going to change. He's nearly 60 years old, and that's what's got him through his career and done him very well in his career. And when he was doing it for us and it was getting us decisions, potentially, we weren't moaning too much. But I just thought some of the comments he made afterwards, there was no need for it at all. Like Gillingham fans shouting from the rooftops, not having to do a team talk because Steve Evans is in town. And
it's just such an egotistical viewpoint that he has. Like, I get it. Like, that's what he's all about. But I thought he really, at the end of that, because I think you tweeted about this his post-match interview, and that's what led me to watching it. And a lot of the Stevenage fans would kind of lap it up a little bit as well. That's what we kind of did as well. Every time we did a post-match interview, you kind of lap it up a little bit. But I did thought, wow, he's really gone for the throat there. And some of the things I'm thinking, like, really, and like Gillingham's Cup final, I'm like, no, it's not.
Which is not the first time he's used that one, has he? I think he used that when he was Crawley Town manager a decade ago. So he's regurgitating stuff as well. He's going to say these things, at least get some new material, like any good comedian.
Yeah, right. Come on, yeah. But yeah, I just thought that that post-match was a little bit bizarre. Like you say, he was only kind of giving compliments to players that he brought in himself to make to cover him up a little bit. It was a bit of a funny one. And but it's what we expect with Steve Evans. Really, he did it for us. He'll do it for Stevenage, and if he leaves Stevenage and goes elsewhere, he'll do it again. That's just what he does. As you already said,
yeah,
that's what he's about. That's what you get with him. Yeah.
And he got his customary yellow card at the final whistle
right at the end.
for rating the referee. He didn't disappoint anyone in the stadium. Said the referee was awful. I just want to touch on that. Said he got all the decisions wrong. Well, there was two that Stevenage blatantly got away with in my head that, again, Steve Evans didn't mention. Alex Gilby should be booked for simulation in my eyes. Yep. And Jordan Roberts should be sent off because he deliberately handballs the ball in the final 10 minutes, claiming a free kick, and he's already on a yellow card. So why is he not given a second caution?
You know what? You just strikes me with that one. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, absolutely should be given a second yellow for that. I don't know why that's not happened. Of course, yeah. Funny one, but I suppose again, do you know, it's that thing with referees though. I mean, you could always, what's out of your control of every football manager, every football player is ultimately the referee in decision making. So I always try and ignore that fact and play and keep to your game. But I think the refereeing decisions yesterday, they evened each other out over the game, and I think that happens in most games. But particularly, we had some decisions go against us, they had some decisions go against us. I think it evens out really in the end of the day, and probably across the whole season as well. Isn't going to be frank.
And compared to some of the rubbish refs we've had this season, I thought he wasn't
he was
brilliant
fine
all the time, but he was one of the better ones.
It was all right. Yeah, absolutely. It was again absolutely fine in my opinion. Yeah, but I agree. There have been some interesting referees over the course of the season so far, but that one didn't strike me as anything unusual.
Right, enough about Steve. As lovely as it was to see him and Paul. Let's move on. And I've called this one, very inventive again, Stevenage Star, more alliteration. I'm hoping we've got different ones, Rhys, because I've gone slightly left field with my pick this week.
Oh, okay.
Purely on the fact that I thought Stevenage didn't look all that first half. We forced them into their change, like we've already mentioned. Piergianni was withdrawn. Michael Boswick came on. He gave them a modicum of control. They then made more changes around the hour mark. I've actually gone for a player that only played 34 minutes, and that was Jake Taylor. I just thought when he came on, they suddenly looked a more progressive football team. Yes, they were still going direct and they was going from back to front fairly quickly, but I just thought it brought their midfield into the game a little bit more. Like I say, he only played 34 minutes, but he just gave them some impetus. He kept the ball a lot better than any of their midfielders. I thought Gilby and Taylor and Roberts were fairly wasteful in good areas with the football. I just thought he improved all of that side of their game. 22 touches in that cameo, 73% passing. I think if you looked at Gilbert, it was something like 58, 60. So, which I get. We've already mentioned how Steve Evans plays. So a lot of their direct longer balls makes it harder for them to hit their target. He moved the ball quicker. He won all of his duels in the air and on the deck. 3 tackles, so he was doing his defensive side. I just thought they looked a better team from the naked eye watching him when he came on. He was the one with I think, very bald head, almost looked a bit like Johnny Williams that played for Swindon. He just got about the park and he just made them sort of play the game a bit quicker. So that's the reason I went with Jake Taylor, because they became a better team in the second period.
It's totally come out of left field. I didn't expect you to pick a substitution, if I'm totally honest. So, and it's interesting you say about Jake Taylor, actually, because you know what? I did notice something when he came on. I think it was the 57th minute or something when he came on. I thought, there was a little bit of change there, and he added something to the game. But we have gone for something slightly different, I have to say, because I've gone for someone that played the whole game. It was a tough one for me. I thought Saxon early played pretty well for Stevenage. Thought it was a good threat, and he got the assist. That was for Danny Rose to head it in. But I thought he did a lot of his duties down the left hand side as well defensively. Made a couple of good clearances, a couple of good tackles, and won a fair percentage of his ground duels and aerial duels. And I thought, you know what, right? He's pretty solid back there. I just seemed to notice him a lot more. He had a bit of energy and he added to the game, but it's very hard to identify a player that is just being solid. And for me, Saxon early managed to do that for me yesterday. And I thought I'd liked him to have been on our team as well. And that's kind of how I felt watching him. But just thought he was a solid player, looked confident on the ball. And every time he had possession, I thought he could create something moving out from the back as well. And I know Steve Evans likes to have these long ball teams, but actually some of the long balls that he was delivering were pretty good, actually.
Yeah, just having a look. We've got 50% accuracy on the long balls, 2 out of 3 crosses as well, 2 key passes. Yeah. Passes in general play only 53%, but it's like I say, it's difficult to pick a star player in a Stevenage team that plays the way they do. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, Stevenage fans. You know how you play. We know how you play, and you're doing it very well. That's why you're top of the league.
Exactly.
But unless you go and win 2 or 3-0 and you get someone scores a couple and there's 2 or 3 assists in a 1-1 draw, the manner of how you play the game, it then makes it difficult for people to stand out. So, yeah, I've got no issue with Saxon earlier. Those that played 90 minutes was very, very decent.
Yeah. I mean, I did obviously put up Danny Rose as well because he got a really nice header. But that's, if he gets a goal, he's going to, in my estimation, go up in his rating a bit. But, he was trouble. But I think early was a better player holistically in that game. for me anyway.
Fair enough. No, can't argue with that at all. It's nice to have different ones. I think the first 3 episodes we had the same each time, didn't we?
Exactly.
So
Well, you went for the subs bench this time, so I know I'm
yeah,
matching you.
I just thought he made them a better team, and I've got no issue with Early. Like you say, looking at his stats, he was very good, and from the naked eye, he had a fairly decent game. Got himself a silly yellow card, didn't he? I think after
Yeah.
the Rose penalty claim for shouting at the referee. But yeah, I think he's on loan from, is it Norwich? It might be. Don't
Might
hold me
be.
to that, and don't take that as gospel. But yeah, decent performance. Right, back to the Gills though, and their
Yes.
performance. We're going to do Gills man of the match. We might have the same with this one. It is another defender for me, same as you've gone for Stevenage. I thought that was Elkan Baggett's best performance in a Gillingham shirt.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, we're going to go with the same one here, I think.
Yeah,
I thought
I've
he was
looked at his
absolutely
stats,
brilliant.
and again, it was a weird one yesterday because it was a very attritional game. So even people
Mm.
like Sean Williams, their passing completion rate was down as well. What we've seen over the course of the campaign so far. And if you look at Elkan Baggett in terms accurate passes, it said he only completed 11%.
Is that, I've got to just go, oh, yeah, it does, doesn't it? 2 out of 18. Wow.
But
Okay.
but in terms of having to deal with Jordan Roberts running off him and Danny Rose,
You know,
Jamie Reid.
just want to say one thing, which, because I've gone for the same one as well. One of the things, apart from the goal, obviously we've talked about, but one of the things I really liked about Baggett's play yesterday, one of the things we missed last season was when we were in trouble at the back and the back line, and we, we always try to do something a bit cutesy and a little bit like trying to pass the ball out. When a lot of the time, I just want people to lump it into Rosette, reset, and go again. And Baggett did that really well yesterday, and I think that went heavily in our favour because we had some tired legs come sort of the last 10, sort of 15, 20 minutes of the game. And Baggett just controlled that and went, right, I'm just going to lump the ball out of play, we'll reset and defend. And I think we were missing that a lot of the time last season. It used to really frustrate me when, a couple of players would be like, just lump it out. Like, Aimer, give him his due, obviously, but there's a lot of the times he'd try to be cute and ping a pass down the right-hand side. I think, hey, we'll just head it out. Like, let's reset and re-go again. But Baggett, for me, did that really, really well yesterday. It was just solid in that area for me.
Yeah, got 8 clearances. I've got that written down. 8 clearances, 1 block shot, 1 tackle.
Yeah.
I've written in capitals 1 big equaliser. Obviously, it was a thumping header for the leveller.
It really was.
But again, back to the naked eye, he just looked very, very good. He stood up to their physicality, won his battles. And yeah, he almost was like a throwback centre half in that defending came to him first and foremost. And then he thought, right, if we've got time to do the other side of the game, and we've said on previous videos, it's great that we've got centre backs and full-backs in Will Wright that want to come and get the ball to feet off of Glenn Morris. And we didn't do that last season. And a lot of what we did in that relegation season was aimless and hopeless. Whereas this season, there seems to be a little more structure to it. But if you're coming up against a team that play the way the game that Stevenage do, I think you just have to defend first and foremost, like you say, and get back into your shape.
Yeah.
And then reset and go again, essentially. Yeah, really big performance from Elkan Baggett, almost a coming of age performance in League Two, and his first senior goal at club level came at a very, very crucial time.
It did come at a crucial time, and I just happened to know the video that I put out yesterday, the Stevenage game, has got my most views because of all the Indonesian supporters of.
Yeah, I've had a
Elkan
few
Baggett
comments as well, and a few new followers on the Instagram page as well, which is great.
Which is great, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, for me, Haman the match. I want to say hands down, but there was a couple of players that were talking that were close, but for me, Baggett was the one that stood out yesterday overall for the whole 90 minutes.
Absolutely. Right, let's get on to them Gills player ratings then. And then I've got one more person I want us to talk about briefly before we finish up.
Okay.
Right, we'll go from goalkeeper first. Glenn Morris, solid 7. Made his 1 save. Distribution was fairly decent. Commanded his box. Solid afternoon for the keeper.
Yeah, totally agree. That save from Mandron is something to be proud of, and that went up his rate. Yeah, 7 for me as well. Yeah.
And then we'll go from right to left. So I've gone Will Wright, 7 out of 10. Thought he was very good again in a position that he's not played over the last few weeks. I've actually put a little compilation of videos together. 3 deliveries in that first half, particular when we were on top, that were absolutely on the money. There's one early doors that he plays to the back post. Elkan Baggett nods it down, and Mika Mandron has a snapshot that goes just wide. There was a flatter one from further into a dangerous area that they have to defend really well. And obviously, the delivery for the goal is outstanding considering the distance it's had to travel. So yeah, really solid 7 for Will Wright, second assist of the week. Centre back pairing, Maxima, I thought was very, very good. I've given him a 7. I thought Elkan Baggat's performance was equally as good, but obviously we added the extra mark on for the goal, so I gave him a 7.5. What did you make of those?
Yeah, so Will Wright for me actually got 7.5. I thought for the assists and the deliveries put into the box just bumped him up a little bit. Did his duties in the position again. He was a bit more unfamiliar with. So I gave him a little bit more for that.
That's fine.
Again, Baggett, I gave him an 8. I thought he was pretty solid at the back and to get a goal. It was 7.5 at the goal for me.
Okay.
Just thought he was very solid. And Maxima a 7 as well. I think those two at the back, they've got a bit of chemistry now, and I think they're pretty solid. And it's a right level of football for them as well to really step on. Maxima with the experience of Baggett with the with the prospect of being a really good footballer at this level and beyond. I think it's a really nice little pair at the back, which is supplemented again with Will Wright. So I was really happy with all those performances at the back there.
Yeah, the one who was probably not the weak link, because that's very harsh on Shea Alexander, but the one that I think they targeted a little bit was because he'd moved over to the other side was Shea. I don't think he did anything particularly wrong, just wasn't quite as good as the others. I gave him a 6.5.
Yeah, 6.5 for me as well. Yeah.
We then move further forward, and we're going to talk about that man, Haki Bedelakun, again. He had his moments again where he was very, very good and he looked a threat, and then he had other moments where he couldn't pass it 10 yards. I thought he was a 7 first half and 6 second half, so I went slap bang in the middle, 6.5 again.
He did exactly the same as me. That's exactly how I thought about it. Yeah. I would just copy what you just said there. Exactly what I think.
And like we've already mentioned, we should be sitting here talking about a performance that has an assist. If it wasn't for one of the misses of the season, unfortunately, Scotty.
Yes. I'm sorry to say.
2 in the middle, I thought were really good. Again, I just thought that spine of the team Saturday was really, really solid and did everything that it had to do, and it allowed us to have a foothold in the game. I thought that was probably Robbie McKenzie's best performance back in the middle of the park, and Sean Williams was equally good as well at mopping up and getting us going back the other way again. I gave them both 7s. I thought they were both very solid.
This is what I gave him as well, and what I found really interesting about this, if to show a solid spine of a team, actually Sean Williams and Rob McKenzie, I didn't particularly notice throughout most of the game. And I wonder if that's a good thing. They were just ticking over and keeping things moving. It's like the batsman at cricket that's just giving the odd singles here and there just to keep the running going, to swap over each over. That's kind of how I felt both Williams and McKenzie were playing on Saturdays. They was just ticking things over, keeping things moving, and just playing that crucial role, that the cogs of the centre of the park. And that's how that's how they were playing for me on Saturday. Obviously noticeable with some of the things they were doing, but just like ticking on, and that's kind of how I saw it. And for me, I think you want that in your midfield, actually, just something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how Neil Harris goes when we do have someone like, because we've got Dom Jeffries coming back up to speed now, who looks a very decent player, looks like someone who wants to get his foot stuck in, and he'll give us legs as well. No disrespect to Stuart O'Keefe or Sean Williams, I don't think they can be paired up in the middle of the park in a 4-4-2 going forward. But obviously, they're good players in their own right, all of them, and it might mean that we can rest and rotate Willow a little bit because he is 36 now. Alex McDonald, left-hand side. A couple of people have said I've been harsh on Alex. I thought he was very good without the ball, and you can never question his work rate and his professionalism and his willingness to do the extra yards. I just thought he wasted possession a lot yesterday. I know he's involved in the goal. He wins the free kick for the equaliser, but there was a couple of times he got into really good crossing areas and he overhit it or underhit it, hit the front man. His passing accuracy was down as well. And I know we've already said about it was that type of game where everybody's was down. I went 6.5. Tell me, have I been harsh?
I think you've been a bit harsh. I gave him a 7 actually.
Fair enough.
I thought he had a good presence on the pitch, and sometimes that alone is enough to be able to just put players out of their kilter slightly. And I think McDonald does that. He's like a little terrier. He's got 110% energy. And then, as someone who's facing Alex McDonald, I don't want to be a defender who is someone who's going to knows how to play the game, running at them or creating space, not necessarily expecting to win the ball, but stretching the play. And he does quite a lot of that off the ball stuff, which I quite like, and it can be unseen. And for me yesterday, he was that. Yeah, he did have a few moments on the ball which were a little bit questionable, but I thought collectively as a midfield or forward unit, I think it would be unfair for me to, to give him less than a 7 in a team that performed pretty well. So that's why I've given him a 7.
Maka, I do apologise. I'm sure you're watching. The front two. I must admit, I was quite surprised that Mika Mandron was the first one withdrawn yesterday, because I thought, in terms of certainly home performances, I thought he was very good. He was up against three absolute brutes of centre halves. I mean, you're not going to find a trio that as big as Van Coot, Sweeney, and Pierre Gianni all season long, I don't think. I thought his general play was decent. There was a few times I get where he'd do the hard bit and then he'd misplace the pass, but he kept wanting to do it. Mika at the moment is not prolific in any times in front of goal. So there could have been a tendency to just go and hide behind a centre back and not want the ball. What I thought he'd done brilliantly was he kept wanting the ball. He kept going to try and find it. He got into good areas. And he did his defensive side. We know he nearly netted an own goal, unfortunately, which would have been probably harsh. But I thought Scott Cashkit probably should have been the one that came off first. I gave Mika Mandron a 7 yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, Mandron for me was kind of like a 7.2, 7.3, somewhere around there, just because I was on the edge of like, oh, I can't give him. He was in my top 3 or 4, just based on the fact his defensive duties yesterday was really stood out to me. I think he was the extra man at the back that really kept he was the extra pillar, I suppose, in that defense when he got back. And then going forward, he did ask questions. He was trying to do the right things, as already said. And you know, if his confidence was low, he could, like you said, hidden somewhere on the pitch and not wanted to move around, but actually he wanted to make things happen. He wanted to get around. He wanted to do some stuff. But it was just that getting back and doing his defensive duties. I really noticed it in Mandron yesterday, and against a team that have, a free scoring and as strong as Stevenage are. I think he's done an excellent job there, getting back and supporting the defensive lineup that happened yesterday. And I thought Mandron did that particularly well.
Scott Cashkit then is the last one in the starting 11. Taking the miss out because it happens. We've already said that strikers miss chances. So I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, we're marking him down because he's missed a sitter, because it's not like a silly red card like Minoga the other week and that type of thing. I just thought Stevenage managed him fairly well. In terms of the pressing and the trying to stretch the game, again, you couldn't fault it from Cashy. He was really, really good in that sense. But again, similar to what I said about McDonald, I just thought it was just one of them days when nothing was really coming off. And maybe the mischance did subconsciously have an effect, but I gave Scott a 6.5. And for me, it should have been him that came off first for Lewis Walker rather than Mika Mandron.
It's flipped now because I gave him a 6 in that performance.
Fair enough.
Maybe I've been a little bit too harsh. I just thought I was actually, when I was trying to get a rating for Cashkit, I was trying to compare it to his other results, his other games he was in. And I thought that was one of his weaker ones. And now you've alluded to the fact maybe Stephen has managed him quite well. I didn't really consider that lens on the rating, but I just thought his usual play wasn't there, in the sense that his touches on the ball weren't as good as they were previously. And I just thought it was one of those off days for Cashkit, and it was completely, overshadowed by this absolute howler of a miss that will keep him up all week, I think. But
yeah, and again, it could be a very good performance that goes in. We could win the game. We could be talking about a man of the match Scott Cashkit performance, but we can only see it, have him say it, sorry, as we've seen it, and it was just one of them afternoons. Substitutes, I gave ratings to Lewis Walker and Dominic Jeffries. Obviously, the other three, Ryan Law, Haji Minoga, and Jordan Green didn't get enough time. So I thought they didn't really influence the game massively, but they didn't do anything wrong. So I just went flat 6s for Lewis Walker and Dom Jeffries.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. Yeah, I mean, actually, it's really nice to see Dom Jeffries getting some running time now. It's been frustrating me since, it was all exciting that you got the Brentford B team player of the year coming to play in Football League with the Gills, and it's just we haven't really seen him. So I'm quite excited to see him getting some minutes on the pitch, and he looks like a tidy player, looks a threat, and I'm excited to see how he develops throughout the season.
Because do you get coverage of the Papa John's Trophy games out in Germany?
I do, and they're the ones I can watch, and I usually have them on the background.
But he's been decent in them. I've been very impressed. He got 77 minutes Tuesday against Colchester, and that'll do him the world of good.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward when he can start a game, and I think it will give Neil Harris a real difficulty in the structure of the team and who to replace him with or how to get him onto the pitch. But you kind of want that, actually. You want to have that puzzle, because it means you've got some decent players to threat in other positions, which players may think that they've kind of sealed and got for the rest of the season. And he's going to come in and stir it up a little bit and really kind of challenge his own teammates to be the best they can be. And I like that.
Because if he comes into the 11 and plays in the middle of the park, then suddenly Robbie McKenzie can play elsewhere, and then Will Wright, Shea Alexander, the left backs have all got to go hang about. Though we've got an option, another contender to take our place, and then everyone goes the extra mile type of thing. So it is. There are signs, and fingers crossed if we can get Dom fully fit and Stuart O'Keefe and Ben Reeves and obviously Ollie Lee. Something slightly different there with Ollie. We're not sure. And we're not going to pry. Obviously, it's a private matter that Neil Harris has said he won't divulge until the time is appropriate. But all in all, I think a fairly good performance from the Gills. No, a very good performance from the Gills. I'm going to be positive this week.
Yes.
And a very deserving point. Just before we finish up, I just want to touch on the minute's applause before the game yesterday. The sad news broke, I think, Friday, that our former kitman, Malcolm Steadman, had sadly passed away. So just from Gills in the blood and from German Gills, love and best wishes to the family, because Malcolm was part of the furniture.
Absolutely.
Always had time to say hello, even when he was retired, however many times, and still kept coming back because he loved it that much. And I thought that the minute's applause was really, really nice yesterday, and was a fitting tribute to a very nice man, a real gentleman.
Absolutely. And just for my 2 pence here as well, growing up supporting the Gills, sitting in the Medway stand, and he was always the most familiar face. He was always the one that you recognised in the stadium. We have all changing players, changing managers all the time, but he was the one that was always recognisable and always a kind face. And I think I remember as an 8 or a 9-year-old going down and trying to get his attention once and having a quick chat, and he was always gave time for fans, and I really like that. And it's a big miss for all the Gillingham family.
Absolutely. We shall end this week's episode on that note. Sleep tight, Malcolm, and up the Gills.
Up the Gills.